Hello, hello. This is Yuri with Moving Sales Professionals and Let's Talk Moving podcast. And with me today, I have Dustin Harper, who is the co-founder of Glue Performance, lifelong salespreneur with over 13 years of sales and leadership. How you doing today?
Doing great, Yuri. Excited to be on here, and thanks for having me on the Moving Sales Professionals podcast.
No problem, no problem. And Dustin mentioned to me that he did a little bit work of with 2 Men in a Truck, so he's not exactly a stranger to the moving industry, although he's doing something that's a little bit more geared towards sales and things like that. So today, speaking of that, we're going to talk about having the right habits, which applies to everything when it comes to being successful in general. You want to make sure that you set course, or rather set correct course for everything that you do. In order to get somewhere, you need to set your goals and set your processes in place. So tell us about that, Dustin.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think everything kind of starts with habits. If you think of motivation, motivation is only going to get you so far. So if you're really motivated going into the week and then you have a couple bad deals or bad things that happen with the customer, it can mess up your entire week. So motivation is only going to get you so far. Discipline's sort of doing things that you don't want to do, which is a great habit to get into. But if you don't build that foundation with those daily things, discipline is only going to get you so far. So really, I think everything goes to habits if you want to be successful in sales. So it's how do you kind of get 1% better every day? And I think where a lot of salespeople kind of go array is that they think of that big picture goal and it seems daunting. It's like, how do I grow my territory by 20% or 30%? But if you can actually break it down into those sort of micro habits, those things that you're doing every day, and really map out your day with those right habits, it can really get you there. And it's not just from a sales standpoint, like how many calls are you making, how many meetings are you setting up, all that. It's also from a personal side of what are you doing to really maximize your time and get rid of the noise.
Yeah, I agree with that. You definitely want to make sure you have your focus on what is I mean, if you're able to set goals for yourself every single day, and then the next day, if you beat that goal, reach that goal, next day, make it higher or keep it the same because you haven't reached it. So you still have the same goal, but it starts every day. You're not building on what you started before. You're starting from scratch every single day with the chance to achieve that goal. And then once you achieve that goal, then you set the next one and the next one and the next one. And that can apply whether you're an owner of a moving company or whether you do have a call center like I do, and you have specific goals in mind for your sales reps to reach and what have you. But I think we all want to set expectations for ourselves, whether they're realistic or unrealistic. We always got to work towards something. That way, we're always keep ourselves hungry. That way, we're never satisfied. And that way, we're always trying to get to a point where we're achieving something for ourselves and obviously for our family, for our loved ones, for our organizations, for our company, for our team, whatever the case may be. So now you mentioned something that I found interesting. So you said that you viewed the salesperson as an athlete. Can you expand on that?
And now for a quick message from our sponsors. For a limited time only, we have partnered with an SEO and marketing company with discounted rates for their services. Schedule an appointment via Calendly link below to learn more. Thank you. And now getting back to the podcast.
Certainly. So a lot of people always talk about how long they've been in an industry or how many years of experience they have. And that's certainly impactful. I mean, if you've been doing something for 20 years, that's great. You're probably, somewhat of an expert in that particular area, whether it's sales or you're a business owner. But at the end of the day, knowledge only gets you so far. So if you're been doing something for 10 or 20 years, but you keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again, are you really learning and getting better? So I think when you look at sales in particular, or if you're a business owner for sure, it's how do you actually perform when it matters, similar to an athlete. So if an athlete is going into a national championship game or some big event and they prepared and prepared and prepared, but then they kind of choke under the big lights, there's nothing you can do about it. Really, I mean, they lost that game or they didn't have a good performance and they have to learn from it and keep getting better. So it doesn't necessarily matter how much you know or how much you prepare, although those are really good things. It's really how you perform when it matters, whether that be a meeting, whether that be a prospecting call or a huge opportunity for a business owner. It's all about kind of having that performance mindset and thinking like an athlete. So all the sales professionals I talk to, no matter what industry and business owners, they seem to kind of have that mentality where they're constantly trying to get better. They're accountable for mistakes that they make, and then they're open to feedback similar to an athlete. So I think the more you can think of yourself like that in sales and put that kind of pressure on yourself and be open to different things, the better you're going to do.
I definitely agree with that, and it's also, especially right now in the moving industry world that we're in, obviously that I'm in more so at this point. But I think that applies to the current situation where we, as people in the moving industry, we have to look at new strategies. So all strategies where you're buying, for example, you're used to buying home advisor leads. You've been buying them and buying them and buying them, and they were great. Today, they're not. They don't bring you 25% booking ratio. They don't bring you, you're lucky if you're getting 10 because the quality is bad. They got together with another company. It's just not the same. So if it's not the same, how can you expect the same performance from these leads that you got 5-10 years ago that you get today? You need to be more creative. You need to look for different sources that are going to produce those kind of numbers for you. Because at the end of the day, you can have the greatest salesperson in the world, but if you're not giving them the leads that they need to produce, they're not going to produce. If the leads, if their quality dropped 30, 40, 50% from what it used to be, then you can't expect them to bring those 30, 40, 50% production that they brought in the years past. You have to be realistic with what you have. So I think it's important that you improve, and it's kind of the same thing. Like if we're talking about athletes, okay? So people that know me know that I'm a huge Penguins fan. I'm into hockey, obviously. So I'm a big Penguins fan, and I'm a big fan of Sidney Crosby. Sidney Crosby reinvents himself, it seems, almost every season that he plays. So one year you saw him get the Rocket Richard, scored, or I think he tied for Rocket Richard that year, right? The next year he got more assists than anybody else. Next year he got more points than everybody else. He's widely accepted as being the best 200-foot player in the game of hockey, in the NHL, in the world, probably. It's the same thing goes with any industry. Things change, trends change, possibilities change, opportunities change. At the same time, like this year, the pie is smaller, but there's more seats at the table. More people are trying to bite at that pie. So the results get affected. So if you keep things doing the same thing that you're doing with new conditions being in play, you're not going to get the same result, no matter what you do. And you need to understand, you need to realize what the issue is. You need to have an open mind, because if you don't, you're not going to succeed, at least definitely not at the level that you expect.
100%. And another note after you were talking a little bit is just, I think salespeople should have this mentality where they invest in themselves. Also business owners. I mean, it doesn't matter how well you're doing. You mentioned Sidney Crosby, obviously an elite athlete, one of the best, if not the best all time in his particular profession, but he's constantly getting better. He's constantly reinventing himself. So I think in sales or a business owner, you have to invest in yourself. It doesn't matter if you had back-to-back awesome years. You can't get complacent. You have to keep, investing in coaches, mentors, programs like what you do, outside resources to help you. Because yeah, you're right. Especially in sales, your industry, a lot of industries, what's working right now is much different than what was working a year or 2 years ago, especially since the pandemic. Things are changing rapidly. So I think you have to invest in yourself, similar to an athlete, and just be open to feedback and getting better. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO of a company or the top sales rep 6 years in a row, you always can be getting better and embrace that feedback. So that's typically the best salespeople I ever see, no matter the industry. They kind of have that mentality.
And now for a quick message from our sponsors. If you're a moving business owner, you may have already heard of Moversville, an email marketing service that helps moving companies increase, repeat, and referral business. But have you heard of Moversville Connect? Moversville Connect is an incredible resource for all things moving. They feature an array of vendors and services that cater specifically to the moving industry. You can find companies that provide moving software, moving sales services, marketing services, moving equipment providers, and much, much more. Visit moversville.com to learn more.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you need to embrace the change. And making things different can feel uncomfortable. I can tell you right now, I'm uncomfortable doing certain things with new people coming through the door in terms of training that I've done in the past because I had a different mentality. But because of the job market being what it is, you almost have to take risks, at least in the beginning, in order to see if the person is going to fit into your model and fit in what you're trying to do and be able to achieve there faster. Because the way that the job market is, you have people like before when you could do a week training class, 2 weeks training class, month training class, and it was fine. People would stick with it. At the end of the day, you had this potentially great salesperson, and the level of attrition wasn't as high. Today, you have people that go into these training classes that obviously they don't tell you, they put on a nice face on for you, but at the end of the training class, you realize that they're not there for the job. They're there to get a 2-week paycheck. And they're putting on a nice face, and they're not in their head, and they're actually making an effort to look like they're getting it. But at the end of 2 weeks, they say goodbye to you, or maybe a week later after the training is over. And it's like, okay, I just wasted 2-week, 3-week paycheck on somebody that frankly never planned to be here. How do we weed those people out? You have to find different ways of testing people almost. You have to find out ways. Well, you have to really dig into them and figure out what makes them tick before you really offer them 2 weeks or anything of the sort that's going to really take an investment on your part. Because honestly, I mean, if you bring in 10 people and you have to invest a couple of grand in every single one of them, and a month later these people leave and you just left 10 grand on the table, it's like, holy crap. If you keep doing that, no business is going to survive.
Yeah, that's a challenging situation for sure, and you have to kind of vet that out. But I think if you want to be successful in that situation as a business owner or in sales, you're going to have to take some calculated risks. So how do you kind of embrace that uncomfortable feeling, that imposter syndrome? A lot of people get imposter syndrome in those situations. But that's actually usually a good thing, because if you have imposter syndrome, that means that you're stretching yourself, you're doing something you're not used to doing, you're kind of pushing the limits. So I think sometimes imposter syndrome can be a really good thing. You just have to take those calculated risks, but you have to understand that, I've taken many risks in my career, changing industries, going from a really high paid corporate job to a all commission job. And there was a couple times where it worked out really well. There's once or twice where I kind of fell flat on my face, and I ended up learning a lot more from that. Not ideal, but I think the more you can kind of embrace that uncomfort and that discomfort and really vet out those calculated risks. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you don't want to look back 20 years from now and regret not trying some things and doing some things different. Because when you get a little bit older and you don't have as many chances to take those risks, it's going to be tougher. But if you do have that flexibility now, I mean, there's no better time than now. The other best time was 10 years ago type thing. So I am a fan of taking calculated risks and getting uncomfortable, especially in sales. And as a business owner, you have to, if you really want to make it these days. But it's painful. But it's painful at times if you make mistakes or you're losing money. So you have to
I think it's important. The idea of calculated risk in general, that's very close to heart to me. When I opened this company, that's what I did. I made $5 grand over the summer. I had a partner at the time, and I could take that $5 grand without hurting my family, without hurting and paying the bills, and put it into the company and see. And at the end of the day, I was ready to, if I lose that 5,000, I lose that 5,000. And I think that's important. Like there was somebody that was over the weekend that was trying to get me into idea of Bitcoins and things like that, which obviously right now there's a lot of that going on. People trying to get you into Ethereum and Bitcoin and blockchain and all that other fun stuff, right? So you hear that a lot. But at the same, and you hear these people talk to you and they say, oh, there's no risk. For you, maybe there is. If you're a millionaire or you have, X amount of dollars in your bank account and you have a lot more than you ever really need, that you're set for a couple of years if you really had to sit without a job, then yeah, you can put down, here you go, here's 10 grand. I know it's an investment. If I lose it, I lose it, but I have it to lose, right? But the thing is that if you don't have it to lose, how do you justify that to yourself? It's a high risk. Yeah, it's a high risk, high reward situation. And maybe if you're young, if you're in your 20s and you have that money to spare and you don't have family that's relying on you, kids that's relying on you, you don't have those type of things going on for you, maybe that's a risk you take. You're in your 20s. Worst case scenario, you fall flat on your face, you go live with your parents for 2 months, 3 months if you have to, right? And then you dig out and you start over, right? But when you're older, when you have a family and you're the only source of income, you can't afford to go and say, hey, here's 10 grand, here you go. That 10 grand, that's like, that's 2 vacations that you can take your family on. And at the end of the day, you're not getting younger. You want your kids to remember something. They don't want you to remember you as solely working the whole entire time. You know what I mean? And you could do that surely, but then when you're done with all that, and when you get to a certain point, and when your kids get older, they're going to realize that you were never there. And in the end, unless your kids are just real nice and they're very forgiving, what are you going to have, and who's going to give you that cup of soup or cup of coffee or whatever else when you're old and you can't do a lot of the things for yourself? So it's like it's easy to say, oh, it's no risk. Of course it isn't. You're not the one that's risking it. I am.
For sure. And everybody's in different life situations as far as how they can take that risk. But at the end of the day, to your point, when you look back on your life, you're probably not going to say, man, shucks, I wish I would have worked more hours with my job. It's probably going to be, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, my friends, like done these trips and all that. So, another epiphany for me was I was sort of living to work versus working to live. And I was doing well. I was successful. I was climbing a ladder, getting promoted, crushing it, all that stuff. But I was like, man, there's got to be a better way. So I became a lot more balanced on the personal growth side. And that ended up making me more effective and actually making more money in the long run when I made that change and I wasn't working myself to death. So I still struggle with that a little bit, but I think if you can kind of
when you have your own business, you become a little bit more workaholic because nobody's going to put into your own thing as much as you do because that's your baby, But at the same time, like especially you can't leave your family behind because that's the reason I was able to do what I did when I opened my company is because I knew that my wife had the back covered. I knew she had the kids covered. I knew I could spend those long hours to start this thing off at work. And I did. I worked 12 hours a day. I was here all the time. Still am, not to the same degree, not the same amount of hours. I do take weekends off. I'm not here till 9 p.m. every night. I'm out of here at 6, sometimes earlier. But still, that's still on the plate. And I think a lot of it has to do with trying to create life-work balance. And it's also, in terms of work itself, it's also about trying to align and build processes and and systems in place that are going to allow you to do that.
For sure. And that's been a big one for me, whether it's with habits or just my sales process in general. I think all the best sales folks and entrepreneurs, they have some type of system, method to the madness process that they're doing. If you don't have somewhat of a roadmap and a map of where you're trying to go, especially if you're selling something more complex that's not as transactional, then there's a lot of mistakes that you can make in sales. So the more you can prevent those mistakes, the better off you're going to be. So I use a system from a sales influencer years ago. I took his one-on-one coaching course and then ended up just really gravitating towards it, and it helped me. And I've been doing well. I just decided to keep investing and change it up because the pandemic happened and it was like Fort Knox to sell anything. So I was like, man, I got to do something different. So when I had a system and kind of a process for my entire sales methodology, it just helped me really guide me throughout those processes. And the same thing for life too. So it's like, what are you doing with your time? Like, how are you prioritizing your time? How are you saying no to stuff that really isn't moving the needle and really being effective and efficient? So I'm a huge fan of systems with personal stuff, but also with sales process as well.
So as far as that type of stuff, as far as a sales process and system, what would your advice be to moving companies, owners out there that, well, sales may not necessarily be their forte?
I think it's easy to kind of just throw people out to the wolves. A lot of industries sometimes just let people kind of that sink or swim mentality. I think that can work to a certain extent, but I think right now, just everything that's changed the last few years, there's so much noise for the people that are buying products. I mean, they're getting slammed with emails, they're getting slammed with LinkedIn DMs, phone calls left and right. You have call ID. So it's like the things that worked 10, 20, 30 years ago aren't working so well anymore. So I think be open to new opportunities, build a process. And if you don't have a lot of expertise with that, I would look to outside resources, you know, like yourself, what I do, and just be open-minded to it, because I think you need a process, especially for newer people. You can't expect them just to learn stuff overnight. And I do think it's way harder to sell now than it was years ago. So if you're not kind of being innovative, if you're not doing something to stand out and be different, it's tough to really compete, because you kind of just get mixed into that sea of sameness and you're just like everybody else. So I would look to outside resources and be open-minded to different methodologies.
Yep, and that's definitely something that I pitch all the time about creativity and being open to new things and finding new ways and being different. But we can talk about that, of course, for hours and things like that. Obviously, we're syncing on that on those type of things in terms of sales. We're both salespeople, so you can kind of tell, right, from listening to us. But once again, Dustin, thank you very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And as I always say, the world moves on its own, so let the professionals move yours for you. Thank you very much for joining us. We will have links for Glued in our podcast. Please like, please subscribe, and please support Let's Talk Moving, and check out Dustin's Glued. And once again, thank you very much for joining us for this podcast.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.